Tall mass timber construction has seen significant evolutions in terms of allowances and project examples over the past 3 years. Future code changes in the 2024 that have already been approved will have significant impacts on how you design tall mass timber projects, specifically on the amount of exposed mass timber, as well as how you design them from a fire resistance perspective. Today's video is going to break down the changes and help you understand how these changes will impact your designs on tall mass timber projects. Well, hey folks, welcome back to another Timber Talk Tuesday. I'm Ricky McLean with Woodworks. Tall mass timber construction in the U.S. has seen a significant growth in both interest and use in the past several years. Going back as early as 2014 and 2015, there was interest among the building design and construction communities to use mass timber in taller buildings than what was prescriptively allowed in the building code at the time, which was a limit of 5 or 6 stories depending on the occupancy. Progress made through actions such as the tall mass timber building competition at the time really spurred a lot of the development, research, and testing that went into facilitating and validating the safety of mass timber in tall buildings. But really what spurred the use of mass timber in tall buildings started in 2015 with the creation of the International Code Council's Ad Hoc Committee on Tall Wood Buildings. Now, over the course of several years, this committee met a number of times, worked on a 2-story full-scale compartment fire test of a CLT structure, and ultimately saw the approval of 17 code changes related to tall mass timber construction reflected in the 2021 version of the International Building Code, recognizing 3 new construction types, 4A, 4B, and 4C, up to 18 stories and 270 feet of mass timber construction. Now, of these 3 new construction types, type 4B, up to 12 stories and 180 feet, is the tallest construction type, which still allows some of the mass timber to be exposed to the interior of the building. Now, not coincidentally, I think what we're seeing in terms of tall mass timber projects in design at Woodworks is that nearly 90% of all tall mass timber buildings in design are 12 stories of mass timber or less. Now, I think some of that you could tie back to the fact that there is a current somewhat of a dead zone in terms of construction projects of that size and scale. However, I think we certainly can't pass over the fact that that is also the height of structure, which does still allow some exposed mass timber. And certainly most developers that are looking to use mass timber are looking to do so because of the enhanced aesthetics and exposed look that they get with a mass timber structure. Now, having said this, Type 4B under the 2021 IBC only allowed 20% of ceilings to be exposed. In multifamily buildings, most projects that are looking to use mass timber are wanting to expose around 50 to 60% of the ceilings. It becomes somewhat of a sweet spot where areas that have congested mechanical, electrical, and plumbing services, such as kitchens, bathrooms, and corridors, will usually have some type of a drop ceiling, chase, or soffit, while the other areas of, say, a residential unit, living rooms, bedrooms, hallways, those might want to have as much of the mass timber exposed as possible. So a lot of projects that were looking to go, say, 8 to 12 stories of mass timber in a Type 4B scenario were bumping up against this 20% ceiling exposure limit. Now, the fire tests that were conducted on the 2-story compartment fire tests that I referenced earlier associated with the 2021 IBC changes were done using a generation of adhesives prior to the current generation. There are currently newer requirements under the PRG 320 standard, the Annex B requirement for assessment of adhesive performance at elevated temperatures, essentially eliminating the use of adhesives in mass timber products which allow char fall off. So with this newer generation of adhesives in mass timber products, another round of full-scale fire testing was conducted, this time at the Research Institute of Sweden. Now, this testing was done in order to evaluate the safety of more exposed timber, specifically in ceilings, using the criteria that was first established by the ICC Ad Hoc Committee on Tall Wood Buildings. Through another round of 5 full-scale fire tests, it was determined that additional exposure of mass timber was safe. And as a result of this testing and the successful results, a code change was proposed for the 2024 International Building Code. Now, this code change would propose allowing 100% ceiling exposure in Type 4B construction, as opposed to the 20% allowance under the 2021 IBC. This code change was voted on and successfully passed, and it will be part of the 2021 International Building Code. Now, in addition to this change in terms of the amount of exposed timber allowed in ceilings of Type 4B construction, another associated change was that related to the separation distance required between exposed mass timber walls and exposed mass timber ceilings. Again, under the 2021 IBC, there was a requirement to have a 15-foot horizontal separation when there was an exposed mass timber wall and an exposed mass timber ceiling. That requirement has now been changed so that there is only a horizontal separation requirement between mass timber exposed walls. When there is a mass timber exposed wall and a mass timber exposed ceiling, there is no longer a horizontal separation requirement under the 2024 International Building Code. The third significant change to tall mass timber building design under the 2024 International Building Code has to do with the non-combustible floor toppings that are required on top of mass timber floor panels. Now, in types 4B and 4A construction, a minimum 1-inch thick topping layer is required on the top side of mass timber floor panels. What was required previously under the 2021 was not only was this topping required to be there, it was also required to be installed sequentially with construction, where if a project were 6 stories tall or more, the non-combustible topping on these floor panels had to be installed no more than 4 floors below the active level of timber install. Now, what this resulted in was some challenges in terms of construction sequencing, where normally this non-combustible topping, very commonly a poured layer of concrete or gypsum-based topping material, would generally be installed quite a bit later in construction, but because of this requirement from the International Fire Code, that installation was required to be pushed up significantly during the construction sequencing process, creating some hurdles and challenges. So a significant change in the 2024 International Fire Code is that these products are still required to be installed, but they aren't required to be installed sequentially following this no more than 4 floors below the active level of timber install. Now, ultimately, how do all these changes affect you as building designers? Well, I think it's important to point out that in a 4B construction, again, where we're seeing a lot of the sweet spot and interest with tall mass timber construction, it really increases the flexibility that you have in terms of designing these projects. It's no longer a case to really try to maximize the 20% ceiling exposure to very few selected areas of a building and perhaps require you to redesign the layout of a unit to maximize where and when you can expose the timber ceilings. Now, with 100% ceiling exposure allowed, it really allows you to have much more flexibility. I also think that we can't overlook the impact that these changes have on cost and the embodied carbon of construction. Requiring 80% of a timber ceiling to be covered with non-combustible materials, such as 2 layers of gypsum wallboard, certainly has a very significant cost and a significant impact on the embodied carbon of that project. Now, in terms of adoption of these changes, as I mentioned, these have all been voted for and approved in the 2024 IBC. They will be adopted as part of that document. Now, the 2024 IBC is not currently published. However, several jurisdictions throughout the country have already pulled in this future code language into their local amendments, such as the City of Dallas, the State of Oregon, State of Washington, City of Denver. Several other jurisdictions are looking to do so. Other projects on a case-by-case basis are looking to evaluate the feasibility of bringing in the future code adoptions with their local building official to determine their acceptability in that regard. If this is something that you're interested in exploring on your projects, please let us know here at Woodworks. We're happy to have project-specific conversations for free. That's what we do. We also have a number of resources on our website related to tall mass timber construction and can point you to these fire test and code-related changes, and more importantly, point out the design impacts that you have as those working on these tall mass timber projects. Well, that's it for today's video. I thank you so much for making it to the end, and until next time, we'll see you later.